Hi everyone, my name is Andrea and I am the potter who normally teaches at the Island Art Centre. But as the Island Art Centre is closed at the minute, you're joining me in my pottery studio and making your home your pottery studio today. And today our workshop is going to be little birds. I'm just going to get you my little example. So this is our little bird that we're going to be working on today. Okay, so I'm just going to give you an idea of how he's made first. So you can see he's hollow, completely hollow. So this is going to be a little pinch pot. So it's a little pinch pot model will form the body. Then we'll add another little mini pinch pot for the head. And then we're going to roll a slight coil for his tail and two little side pieces for the wings. I'm going to show you those before I get started. So these are all our pieces. If I tilt this down, you'll see that this is our little pinch pot. This is a little additional that will be his head and a little beak. This is our piece, which will be the tail. And these two little pieces will be the wings. Okay, so these are the elements that we're going to need to make today, and then we'll learn how to put them all together to make the bird. So we have in our clay crate, you should have your wooden board, which is what I'm working on at the minute. You will have some colors. So this little tray of colors has the 5 colors that we're going to use today. You'll have some sponges and a few paintbrushes. This is our really important tool today, our little stick. And I will have a little empty pen as well. This is really good for making the eyes. So I'm going to take out our colors. We're going to have porcelain white. Okay, so it's pretty easy to see, it's white. We're going to have black, which can look a little bit grayish. Okay, we have a brown. So they're all pretty much as you imagine they're going to look, but they will fire up a little bit differently. And fire up just means when I heat them and turn them from clay to pottery. So this is our yellow. Sometimes the yellow can have a little bit of water on top and look a bit cloudy. You can mix that through or either pour off the water if there's a lot of it and then mix the remaining color in the pot. And then this last one looks a little bit green, but it's actually a blue color. Okay, when it fires up, it's a blue color. So these colors are slip, which is clay and water. So as I say, when you take the lids off, sometimes the water will rise to the top and the heavy clay will go to the bottom. They are fireable colors, so the colors will be richer when they are fired in the kiln. So here's my kiln here. Okay, so they'll all go into the kiln and the colors will change. Okay, so the yellow, which you've seen, will become much, much more vibrant, bright yellow. We're going to be using the black, which, as I say, looks a little bit grey, but it will become very, very definitely black. This is our brown. Okay, and this is the greeny colour, which will become blue. Okay, I'll just put that in just in case anybody wants a little bit of bluebird going on there. And then our porcelain white is a super white. So this is the colour of the clay, and this is the colour of the porcelain. Okay, so these are fired. Okay, these have been in the kiln, they've been changed from clay to pottery, and then they've gone into the kiln again with the shiny glaze on top. Okay, which will add that lovely shimmer to them. Okay, like all the pottery that you would use at home, like plates and mugs, have that lovely glaze on them. And I'll just be putting a clear glaze over all the colours that you put on today. So once we've removed all those colours, I'm just keeping the lids on for the minute, but this is the container I want you to get first off. Okay, I'd like you to put a little bit of water in that. Okay, I'm just going to put a little bit. I don't want loads because I don't want to spill it. And you're going to get your clay from your clay bag. So you should have 2 balls of clay. The biggest one is going to be the pinch pot. That's going to be the body of our bird. So if we start off with that, we don't want to change it from being a circle. Okay, but it is really, really wet and a bit sticky and a bit hard to handle. So what I want us to do is just to hold it in our hands first, give it a pat, and just heat that water up with the warmth of our hands. It'll make our hands a little bit sticky. Okay, so hopefully in your information about the class, I asked you to have a little damp cloth at hand. This is perfect. If the clay starts to dry on your hands and it's irritating, the damp cloth is perfect. So it's not, you know, the water's not going to squeeze out, it's not soaking wet, just a little bit of water on that and it's damp. And over here I have my hairdryer, and we'll need that later on for drying up our pottery and drying up our colours. Okay, so if you want, you can roll this around your board. If your hands just don't like the sensation of the sticky clay, you can just roll it around your board and help it dry up a little bit. And the water will go back into the board, okay? And therefore your clay will just not be quite as slippery, will firm up a little bit. Okay, so the first shape that we're going to make is the body, as I've said, and we're going to do a pinch pot or a thumb pot. This is the first form of pot making known to man. Really, really nice and simple because all you need are your hands. So sometimes it's referred to as a pinch pot and sometimes it's referred to as a thumb pot. The thumb pot is basically it's called the thumb pot because the thumb is the first thing that you push into the clay. Okay, so we're going to take that thumb. We're going to set it on top of the ball. Okay, I'm using my right hand because I'm right-handed. This is my better hand for moving and shaping. And my left hand is going to be the support for the clay. Okay, I want the shape to remain nice and rounded, so I don't put it on the board because what you find is it will flatten because the board is flat. But because my hand is curved, it gives it that nice curved shape. So I put my thumb on the top and I can push it down just a little bit, just maybe down to my nail. Now you are going to get a bit of clay stuck behind your nail, but that's fine. So I'm just going to just put about my thumbnail in. Okay, so you notice when you're putting that in, your thumb bends. This knuckle joint here of your thumb will mean that the hole will not go straight down and it can go a little bit off to one side, leaving one side of your pinch pot really thick and one side really, really skinny, dangerously skinny. So it's important just to keep your thumb really, really straight and just wiggle it in nice and straight. So I'm turning it on the side so you can see you can do this as well, or if you prefer to do it this way, it's up to you. I'm going to wiggle it a little bit more, but I don't want to push it all the way through because it will come through the bottom. Now my thumb is bigger than this ball of clay. Maybe you need to lose all of your thumb in this ball of clay, okay, to get anywhere near the bottom. We want to leave a little bit at the bottom that doesn't have our thumb touching, because otherwise we'll go all the way through. But my thumb is huge, so I'm using my thumb as a measure. Pop my thumb in and I know I can go a little bit more. Okay, I know I can go a little bit more. So if you are not sure if you've gone far enough and you've got somebody with thicker and longer thumb, maybe they can try it out. So if that's a mum or a dad or a gran or an aunt, whoever's helping you today, you can get them just to check. Okay, the palm is important because you can feel if you're getting too close to the bottom as well. Okay, so I've got this much of my thumb disappeared. Okay, and I know that's just about the right amount. Okay, I've made a hole. It's not big enough just yet. It has thinned out the clay a little bit. Okay, when I put the clay in the kiln, it can't be more than an inch thick. Okay, or it shouldn't be anywhere near an inch thick. Okay, so what we want to do is we just want to thin it out a little bit, but we still want this lovely rounded shape. So it's going to be upside down in the end. So this is going to be the bird body, and it is just a little on the thick side now. So all we're going to do in the next part of our thumb or pinch pot making is to pinch the clay a little bit. Our thumb goes in again, it turns on its side and it uses the pad of our thumb on the inside, pushing against the inside wall, and our fingers are on the outside, just making sure that we don't push that thumb too far. This is a slow process. It's meant to be slow, okay? It's not meant to be quick and misshape the clay. If you go too quick, you're definitely going to maybe make areas that are too skinny and the pot might collapse. So it is a really slow, steady kind of making. Okay, so my thumb goes in. Okay, I turn it on its side and I'm right down at this part. Okay, I don't need to push down, I need to push to the side, and I'm going to make a little bit of a turn. Now your thumb can bend this time. Okay, so you're probably actively encouraging your thumb to bend. So my thumb is going like this. Okay, just at that bottom bit, just one little push and I turn. I keep going, and I keep going, and I keep going. And I'm right round to the beginning again. Now bear in mind I have big fingers and big thumbs, so it might take you twice as long if your hands are a little bit smaller than mine. Okay, but when I look inside, it's definitely opened it up at the bottom, but I haven't got it too big here, and I need that to remain nice and tight. If I can show you my little bird again, okay, it's nice and tight at the bottom. It will get a little bit misshaped from the circle, so that's fine. It doesn't have to be as tight as this little finished one just yet. Okay, so we have done some thinning out at the bottom bit. As I say, if your hands are a little bit smaller and you want to go again, just to be sure, you can go again. Even I might just double check and just maybe go lighter this time. And I'm just evening out some of the bits that fell between my thumb and my finger. Okay, maybe even in between my thumb and my finger, there's a bit of clay that's maybe just a little bit thick. So I'm just going around one more time, just gently giving it a little press. So you can see the whole idea of pinching. Pressing the clay between your thumb and your fingers, pinching it a little bit. Like if you're pinching anything to see how thick it is, you use your finger and your thumb to feel how thick a thing is. Okay, so there we go. I am happy with that. Okay. I still have a bit of a thick bit of clay here. And so the next part of my pot is going to be going up here. But I don't want this bit to get too wide. So this time I'm actually kind of encouraging the clay to come around a bit. So my thumb is in, and I'm on this bit, okay, top bit. And I'm just going to push my thumb out and draw the clay over the top of my thumb. So if you can watch, I've got my fingers here. I'm pushing my thumb out against these fingers, but then I'm pulling the fingers around. Can you see how it's slightly curving? Okay, so again, this is a take your time bit. So the thumb is pushing and it's just pulling it around. So it's thinning that out a little bit and keeping it nice and tight. Okay, so I'm pushing it in. So it's kind of hooking underneath that bit here. And then I'm pushing out and curving the clay around. So the push out happens first. I push out against these fingers and then I curve the clay around. See, I'm using all my fingers now. Now you're going to see your fingers quite a lot in the shape, but that is absolutely fine. Do you see how many finger marks I've made? You can leave them and we can encourage these as parts of the feathers of the bird. So you can see I'm a little bit open, but that's fine. And I've still got that lovely round shape. I can see clearly that it could be a pot if I wanted it to be a pot. Okay, it's not just a little dent in a big ball of clay. Okay, so it's nice and safe now for me to fire it because it's not really thick. Okay, you also notice it's not really thin around here, so I'm happy that I can sit it like this and it's not going to collapse. So if you've taken it nice and slow, hopefully the shape is held for you. If it has gone a little bit wide on you and you think, oh gosh, I can't push, I don't know how to push that back into shape, it is literally push it back into shape. Hold it with both hands and smush it in a little bit. Okay, you're kind of encouraging the clay to wrinkle and come in on itself a little bit. And hopefully that will give you the shape. As I say, sometimes we're really, really quick with the pot making and we maybe go a little bit wild and wide. Okay, because this pinching is really therapeutic and before you know it, you're doing it and you're maybe making it a little bit too skinny. And so that's how we would take care of that. We would just squish it back in again. Clay doesn't like to be squished all the way back into a ball again and reformed because you'll find that you've got lots of air bubbles in there and they pop. And if they pop when you're making, they make the wall thin. But it's worse if they don't pop and we put them into the kiln, which is just behind me here. They when they're heated up, just because it's just like a big oven, though the air inside those air bubbles, it wants to pop too, but it pops by taking part of your pottery away. So be very careful that you just don't squish it all back up into a ball. Just keep it nice and slow and steady, and hopefully you get something like a round shape. Okay, and if it's a little bit wide, just push it in, just like I've said. So we're at that stage where it's kind of like a little ball, but we know that it's not a ball, it's hollow. Okay, so we're ready to get our small ball of clay that we're going to make all our other bits out of. So from our bag, we're going to take out our nice tiny ball of clay. Okay, this will be sticky as well. Pop this one over here. This will be sticky, so I'm going to give it a little bit of a roll. But this is the modeling bit, the one that I am actually going to be doing a lot of work on. So I really don't want to make it too dry. What I want to do is I want to break it up into 3 bits. Now, it doesn't really matter if one of the bits is bigger or smaller because you can steal little bits off, okay? So if you want to, you can just grip it and pull a bit off. Okay, there's 1, 2, 3, or you can get a helper to help you with that. Okay, so there's 3 that are roughly they're about the same size. One of them is going to be the head, okay? So if you would prefer your head to be smaller, you can use a slightly smaller piece, okay? So I'm going to show you the 2 birds that I've made. This is the one that I showed you earlier, and his head is a little bit bigger than this little one. His head is a little bit smaller. So it doesn't matter if it's bigger or smaller. It's entirely up to you, okay? So I'm just going to randomly pick this one. Okay, and I'm going to roll it into a ball. All right, so that ball is going to be a little bit bigger when I make it a pinch pot. And it's going to go there. So that's quite a big head, okay? So if I went and thought, well, actually, maybe this one's better, and I rolled this one, I'm going to find that they're pretty much the same. I think I've done a good job of giving myself 3 even bits. Oh, well, that one's definitely the bigger bit. That'll be the tail, I think. Okay, so this one's slightly smaller. I think I'll go for that one for the head. But if you wanted it smaller, you could just take a bit off. Just press it onto the other bit, and we can use that for the wings. Okay, so I'm just going to roll this one into a ball, and this is going to be my head. Okay, these 2 bits I'm going to put back just sitting on the plastic, just so they don't get too much water lost from the board. Okay, so we know how to do a pinch pot. This is a mini pinch pot. What we're going to do is either use one finger or one thumb. I think I'll use this finger, my Peter pointer, and I'm just going to pop it into this little one, this little tiny ball of clay. Okay, so it's like a mini version of what we've already done. You see? And maybe I want to make it a wee tiny bit skinnier, but not too much. So I'm just giving it a little press. You see, there's not really much happening. I'm just maybe making it a little bit thinner than it was. I'm trying to keep it round. So that's like a mini version of what we've just done. And all it took was one finger. And maybe just the tiniest bit of pressing. See how thick this is? It's not really overly thin. This head is going to go here on the body, okay? But when you think about it, if we join that on, I will have trapped a big bubble of air. And I've just told you that bubbles of air like to blast out. So we would risk maybe the head blasting off. So what we need to do is we need to take this little tool here, or a pointy stick, and we're going to put, so I know where it's going to go about there. It can go a little bit higher if you want it to. Sometimes you maybe want to have it a little bit lower, like the bird's head is a little bit lower. It's up to you, you decide. Okay, but I want mine about there, and I'm going to take this stick and I'm going to put a hole right through. And hopefully you can see that it's right in the middle. Can you see that stick coming through? Okay, and I'm going to wiggle it around and make it a bit bigger. Okay. So this means that the air that would have been trapped in there can actually escape into the body and out through the base. Okay, so we're not making any little blasting heads. Okay, so now we're going to learn how to join these 2 together. I'm going to add this bit to this bit. Just to know where I'm going to join it, I might just draw around it with the pointy part of the stick. I don't even have to be terribly even. It just gives me an idea of where I need to scratch, okay? You need to scratch the surface of the 2 bits that are going to join. And you can use a thing called cross-hatching, where you do a line. So you can see that from the center to this line is where I need to cross-hatch. Hopefully you can see that. So I'm going to do lines. They don't even have to be terribly neat. And I'm going to go opposite direction, and it creates like a cross-hatch effect. I'm going to do lots of them so that it's actually really quite broken, but I'm not covering up this hole. This hole is really important. I'm going to do the same scratchy effect on these bits of the mini pinch pot. So scraping, scraping, scraping. Okay, it's quite soft modeling clay that we're using, so just smush a bit. So my fingers are trying to keep the shape. Okay, I think that's loads. I'm going to take one of my bigger paint brushes and dip it in the water. So remember the water I got you to put into your tub earlier? And I'm going to dab a little bit of water on. Okay, I'm not going to brush it backwards and forwards on the cross hatching, because then that would smooth over the cross hatching. I'm going to dab a little bit on my cross hatching here, and then I'm going to make these 2 stick together. So if I just set them on, okay, they're not going to stick. Okay, I need to encourage, I think actually I can see him starting to slide. Okay, what you need to do is you just need to work the cross hatching together. It is kind of like you're rocking it backwards and forwards, and I'm working the cross hatching into one another. Okay, so if you can imagine, if I don't do that, the cross hatches will sit together, but maybe not grip together. So I'm just going to squish, squish, squish. Okay, still trying to keep that nice roundy shape for his head. Okay, so our biggest piece of clay, our other bowl, I'm going to take a little nip off that. Okay, and this one I'm going to make a wiggly worm. Okay, I'm not going to feed the bird just yet. This is going to really help blend the head into the body. Okay, so it's going to be kind of like blending the feathers for his neck. So I take the ball, or the lump of clay, and I make a ball, and then I'm going to roll a worm between my fingers. If you want to roll your worm on your board, that's absolutely fine. Just make your board nice and damp first with your damp cloth, so that the board doesn't steal some of the water from the super skinny worm of clay. Okay, so this is me rolling it. Now you do need to roll really gently. If you find it going flat, it just means you're pushing down too hard and you're not just allowing the clay to roll really gently over your hand or over your fingers. I kind of tend to use my fingers rather than the whole hand. Okay, and I just roll it on a nice damp board or on a damp hand. It's up to you. Okay, and it doesn't have to be one bit. It can be 2 or 3 bits. If it breaks off, that's fine, as long as you have like a scarf to wrap around his head. Okay, so this is going to be plenty. Okay, you see how it just fits. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to press it in lightly to fill the space, and all the air will be pushed out if we do it nice and gently. Now it does look like he's got a scarf on, and we don't really want him to be a wintry bird. We're making him a nice spring summery bird. Okay, so what we want to do is we're going to blend it. So this tool again is what we're going to use. I don't need to use the pointy bit anymore. I'm going to go for the blunt end, and I'm actually going to use the side of it. Okay, and I'm going to blend a little bit of the clay down, a little bit of the clay up. Okay, so that it becomes a bit of the head and a bit of the neck. Okay, and I blend it so that it just disappears. Just me doing that. It's going up into the head. Bits of clay will come off, but hopefully they will just stick back down again. Or if they're bothering you a lot, you can just wipe them on your cloth. Okay, so just pushing that one down. I'm just holding it so that I can see what I'm doing. I'm blending some up, some down. Should have most of my blending up done, but when I look at it closely, maybe I didn't do such a good job. Okay, so you see his messy little neck. Now you can leave that mess if you want, because we're going to be doing a feathery effect, okay? But he's got a little misshape with all of that, and what I just want to do is I'm just going to make sure it looks nice and rounded. So I'm just going to smooth it a bit with my finger. Make sure the head looks nice and rounded. Well, my thumb is good for smoothing that as well. Okay, so it's like a little bubble on a big bubble. Okay, so what's left of that big lump of clay is going to be our tail and our beak. Okay, so what I want to do is take another little nip off. This is really tiny, so it's going to dry out a lot. So get your hand nice and damp and make a tiny little ball. Now this is our beak. And for the beak, it's going to need to be flat where it joins the head. So I'm going to make it flat on the board. Okay, so I've just sort of set it against the board to make that bit that's touching flat. And then I'm going to make it sort of pointy by doing my pinching fingers. Thumb and finger, pinch up. All right, it's really tiny, it's going to slip about all over the place. So I've made 2 sides quite flat. I pinched up like that. I made 2 sides quite flat, but then I turn it and make the other part come up into a point. Again, I have to keep damping my finger, otherwise it just gets too sticky. So there's the flat bit touching my finger, and I'm just going to grip, pinch up, and grip, and pinch up. Now it doesn't need to be terribly long for a beak. It's actually really sticky because we're working in such a tiny amount, and obviously I am adding water to keep it sticky. Sometimes you feel like it's maybe just a little sticky. But I think that might be okay. So hopefully you saw what I was doing. I'm pinching up like this, and then I'm turning it to get the other bit sides, and I'm just smoothing them to a point. Okay, so we're making like this little beak shape. I want that to join on about there. Okay, so we've learned how to join 2 pieces of clay together, and that is cross hatching and slip. Okay, the slip is just the water and the clay that we scratch. Okay, so I'm just going to scratch about the middle of the head. That's where I want my beak. You decide where you want yours. X can mark the spot on the beak, but then you have to just scrape it a bit more. And X can mark the spot on the head, but you have to scrape it a little bit more. Okay, so it's well broken up clay using the stick, or the pointy part of the stick, and going into the clay quite firm. Okay, a little bit of water, a little touch of water, and then we have to work that in. Remember, not just setting it on because it could easily fall off, but giving it a little twist a little press in so that it becomes part of the head. You can even take your little stick and blend it in a little bit. Remember that side of the stick that we've used before? It's a bit sticky now because I've used so much water. Okay, but hopefully you can see starting to very much look like a little bird. Because just maybe a little bit pointy for me. Okay. His eyes are on the side of his head. And what I like to do is use this pen top that I talked about earlier. I'll show you with this little lump of clay. When you set it in to the clay and give it a little twist, it will leave a little eye shape. Okay, now, I think that's big enough for the bird. If you would prefer just a tiny dot of an eye, you can use this pointy part of the stick and just do a dot, or you can use the blunt end of the stick and just do a dot. Now that will push the eyeball in. Those two here, that's the point of the stick, and the blunt end of the stick will push the eyeball in, but the pen top leaves a sort of rounded eyeball shape. Okay, so that's kind of sticking out slightly. Okay, so I'm going to go with the pen top for that, but remember you have the choice of the pointy part or the end of the stick, the blunt end. I'll show you on this one that I haven't colored yet. That's the pen top. Okay. Whoops. I'm just going to take this bit here and I'm going to press it in. Okay, that's one little eye. And then I'm going to turn him around and see where the other eye should go, because I think I would prefer it nice and even on his head, if you can see there. One on one side, one on the other. Okay, so we are left then with the amount of clay for the tail from this ball. Remember, we still have another ball, which is going to be the wings. Okay, so this bit for the tail, we're going to just reshape it into a ball to start off with. And then I'm going to make a coil. Remember at the very beginning I said it's a little bit like a coil shape? Well, a coil is like a thick worm. Okay, so you can either roll it in your hands, so, or you can roll it on the tabletop. Remember, it does go very flat easily on the tabletop if you push hard. So I'm just going to roll it a little bit like this. It's not a massive bird, and we don't really want a very, very fine or very, very long tail, because these are things that can easily get knocked when they're traveling from your home to the pottery studio. Okay, so that's all I'm going to do, just a little bit. Okay, I want one bit to be thick where it touches the body. So I'm going to use this thick bit here, and I'm going to give it a little tap on the table to make it a little bit flat and a little bit thicker. Okay, and this bit I want a little bit thinner. Okay, so I'm not going to use this the damp part of the board because it would stick a bit. I'm just going to use a dry bit of the board. I'm going to take my finger and I'm going to pat it down a little bit. And then I'm going to turn it around. Remember, this is a bit that's going to join onto the bird so it's nice and flat. This is the bit that comes away from the body, so it will get finer as it leaves the body. Okay, a bit like the top of our arm is thicker than the point of our finger. Okay, it gets finer. So I'm just going to pat that down. Now it's got a little bit flat, so I'm just going to make it a little bit slender by doing a little bit of pinching. Alternatively, you can just set it on the board and just tap the sides. So we've been doing this, and then you turn it on its side and tap. Put it back and do a bit of smoothing. Just keeping it nice and tight. Okay, so I'm tapping the sides. This is how it's going on the body. Okay, does that make sense? So this is my little example from before. If I turn around, you can see we're pretty much there already with that shape. The only addition is that I've put a little bit of marking on it, kind of like a feather marking. Okay, and I did that with my stick. I'm going to use the pointy end. Okay, and I just start off the top and just pull it down. Now when I do this, I'm kind of using the side of the stick, even though the pointy bit's starting, and kind of gliding the side of the stick down. And it does do a little bit of cutting at the very end. Do you see how it leaves a little bit of frayed edges? Okay, little bits, they'll just break off, but it will give you a very natural look. If you want to do it on the other side as well, if the tail's kind of pointed up slightly, you can see that. You might want the other side done. So remember, it's the side of the stick, and you just, it's almost like you're brushing the tail. You see? I can even do the sides a little bit, so they look nice and natural. This bit's going to get blended a bit, so I'm not going to bother doing too much to that, okay? Okay, so we now need to join that on to our bird. So you have to decide where you want it. Do you want it here? Do you want the tail a little bit lower? Okay, is this tail really sticking up? You decide. Now I've got mine sticking down, so I think this one, it would be nice for a little change to have one that's sticking up. Okay, so we know how to join. We do X marks the spot, but look how big this is. This is going to need a lot of cross hatching. There's my X, I've got double X. I think I was doing a little bit low. And then I do lots of scratches using the point of the stick, really making that surface scrape, not all the way through to the middle of the body of the little bird, but a deep bit of cross hatching. And then on the bottom, the very same. Lots of lines, scratching, scratching. Okay, really broken up. Our water will help us. Next. And oops, on it goes. Just about caught it. Okay, so set it on. Okay. And I'm just going to wiggle it in. Okay, so wiggle it in, wiggle it in. You can see mine is going right up this time. So wiggle it and then blend it with the side of your stick. Just blend it into the bird. And remember, it doesn't have to be terribly neat because we're going to put lots of feathery marks on these areas, okay? So I'm actually pulling a little bit of clay down from the tail. See if you can see. Into the body. This is why I was not bothering putting texture on this bit, because I'm pretty sure I would completely lose it with this blending. Okay, so this has really encouraged the tail to become part of the body now. And I've got lots of sticky clay left behind because that's the excess water that comes out. Okay, so he looks a little bit lumpy, and I might need a little bit of shaping of that tail again. So you just have a look and make sure that you're happy with it. And you can start putting on a bit of the feathery texture. Now, obviously we do still have the wings to put on, but once the wings go on, it's hard to put texture behind them. So it makes sense to do it while we have no wings on. Again, our tool is going to be our stick, and you're just going to do a little bit of brushing on the body, okay? Hopefully this tail is nice and strong. Now, the hair dryer is for drying and firming this tail up. If your tail's very, very floppy and you need to hair dry it now, you can do that. Mine is nice and strong enough, okay? It does need to be hair dried before I put the color on, but right now all I want to do is put my texture on. So I've done a lot of this kind of feathery texture on one of my birds, and another one of my birds that I haven't colored has this bit of dotty texture on him, okay? So rather than just a color pattern of dots, like this little guy, I've gone for a bit of a texture pattern. And what I've used for that is the back of the paintbrush. So it's not like a deep hole, it's kind of nice and rounded because the paintbrush end is nice and rounded. Okay, so if I demonstrate with this little one, if I want some marks on him, I just set it in, twist it around, pull it out, and it will leave that lovely mark behind. Okay, so hopefully you can see. Okay, so it's entirely up to you. You can hold the bird in the hand now, okay? He kind of fits quite well in your hand, and you can look at him in the round, like turning him around, and decide where you want your texture to be, okay? I'm doing a little bit more blending on the neck, and it's leaving a nice texture behind, so I'm not really going to do a lot with that because I quite like all of this, but I am going to put a bit of this brushed feather marks just below that. So now is a good time for you just to be putting on all of your texture and your pattern. This really helps blend the tail into the body as well. So I'm doing extra from the body into the tail, so it looks like it's one piece. I have to be careful of those eyes. It does look like I've squashed my eyes a little bit and all that handling. I can tidy them up later on. Okay, so the idea is to put a little bit of texture everywhere that you want the texture. Obviously, if there's areas that you would prefer to be nice and smooth, then you can smooth it with your finger. If it's smooth enough, you don't need to do anything. Okay. I'm leaving the head quite untextured in this one. I think that works for me for this little bird. On the underside of my tail, because it can be seen, I just want to put a few texture lines on that. And I think since I've got dots on one side, I'm going to smooth out some of those textures and put the paintbrush end texture of dots. You can see when you're texturing that there's still a lot of movement in your clay. So it can change shape very easily, which is why we're supporting it. Okay, it's really taking shape now. Okay, so you can feather mark it so that it appears that it has wings on. So if you wish that to be done, it can be done. But you do have a little bit of clay left for the wings, so I want to cover that. Okay, so this is my leftover clay. Okay, that's the extra bit that I took off the head, and I'm just going to put it into this wall of clay. Okay, I'm going to divide this up in half. Okay, so just breaking it in half, and I want to make 2 smaller balls with that. So you can see I'm dampening my hands every time to make sure that the clay is nice and moist, okay, that it hasn't been sitting drying out and that I'm not stealing extra water from it, okay. So if I just tilt down the camera again, you'll see what I'm working with. They should be more or less the same size, okay. And what I want to do is I want to flatten them down. So I'm going to just use this part of my hand and I'm just going to flatten them a little bit on the table. Now that pressure is going to make them want to stick to the table, so you do need to release them. Okay, and again, I want to flatten them down a little bit more. It just fits so well there in my hand. Your hand, you might find a different part that fits really well, but for me, this works really well. Okay, so that's my 2 wings. Okay, so they just look like squashed balls of clay, and they are. If I can just get my other 2 from a little damp crate, you can see then I've put lines on them. Okay, this just gives an indication of the feathers, and it makes the ends a little bit delicate, very much like our tail. Okay, the actual wing, when it goes on, can be further feathered and made to be a bit softer blended into the bird. Okay, I think this one I left, this little one that I colored, I've left the wings sticking out a little bit, if you can see, but they are much more soft in their feathering than the initial marks. But that gives you an idea of how we start. Okay, so we know that it's going to be the stick because this is our big tool for today. Okay, and what we're doing is we're just putting it on the side, the pointy bits right here, and I'm just going to brush down like that. Again, it's okay to cut through a little bit on the end. So for this one, I'm about so close to the top, and then I'm just doing this. Okay, but it's easier when you do it against the board. You can repeat that a few times if you want, and you'll get that more broken effect and just break off any loose bits. Okay, I'll do a little bit more broken effect on this one, just so they match. Okay, now we've got to decide where they're going to go. Okay, so you can move them around, decide where they want to go. It tends to be thicker here because this would be kind of what we would consider to be the shoulder of the bird. So our shoulder is thicker, so it would go on first, and then these are the ends, like our fingers, they're finer. They come away from the bird. So I've got these 2 here. Okay, so they do look quite thick, but I'm going to blend some of that in. All right, so it's up to you. Maybe a little bit higher, a little bit lower. You just find what works for you. Okay, so once you've decided where you want them, X marks the spot. We've already got quite a bit of scratching already done because of our texturing, but remember this would be much, much deeper. Okay, you can see it's much, much deeper. And again, on the wing, I'm not going to join the tips of the wing on. I'm going to leave those tips sticking out slightly. So I'm only going to be cross hatching this part. Okay, and these are the tips. Can you see these are the bits that are going to be sticking out as if he's, you know, if they're fluttering a little bit. And I'm going to do the same on the other side. So lots and lots of cross hatching. I'm just looking at it head on to make sure that I've got them sort of either side of his body rather than maybe one a little bit higher or a little bit lower. Okay, so this is the end, so I don't need to cross hatch that bit because I'm leaving mine fluttering. But I definitely need to cross hatch all these bits. Okay, so water on our cross hatching, dabbed on, not brushed on, because we don't want to cover that lovely cross hatching up. Dab it on both. Just make it nice and slippy because I'm going to do a bit of blending on this as well. Okay, so we want to find out where our untextured bit is because that's the shouldery bit that will be closest to the head, and these little skinny bits come away from the body. So I'm setting this on, and remember we need to give it a good press. And if I'm going to blend it, I can just take some of that clay with either with my finger or the stick and blend it in. Oops. Can you see how that's got blended? Sorry. Yeah. The same with the other one. Just checking I put enough water on that. Okay, so that's it on. And this is the blending that I want to show you up close. Okay, I can hear like it's squelching. That's what you want to hear. You want to hear the water squelching out. Okay. Again, you can do a little bit of texturing on that if you wish. You just decide what you think looks best for your bird. This one I've sort of blended a little bit more than this one. You can see it's a little bit still present, and I really don't want to see that in this version of the bird. So I'm just going to blend that in a little bit. Either the back of my nail sometimes is a good tool, or our modeling tool, or stick, the side of the stick, or our fingers. Okay, so I'm just holding him in my hand and I'm just having a little look at him, and hopefully you're doing the same with your little bird. And I think I'm happy enough with that little bird. Sometimes the tail gets a little knocked, so I'm just going to look at him while he's on the board and make sure that everything is fine, that I'm happy with the eyes. If I need to just go over the eyes again, I might do that to make them stand out a little bit more. Okay, I think he's ready to be dried. Okay, now we do need your name on the bottom, but he's still a bit squishy and squashy. And with a bit of hair drying, he will definitely firm up. Okay, so if I blasted him quickly with a hair dryer, I would be wanting the clay not to feel sticky. All right, this little bird here has already been dried. Okay, and he's lost that sort of sense of stickiness. Okay, but it's up to you. It's up to you, you know, how long you're going to dry it. You might find that your hair dryer is much stronger than mine, and that you only have to give it a quick blast. The idea is that it shouldn't feel as if it can move too easily. Okay, this other one, he's quite firm now. Okay, this one I can sort of change his shape easily, and I don't really want to be able to do that. So it's hair drying time. Okay, so you will take the hair dryer and give him a quick blast. Now I can decorate this one easily, but what I would like you to sort of note is how long I'm hair drying mine. Okay, so if you see me putting down the hair dryer, you think actually maybe this is a good time for me to turn off the hair dryer and check mine. We don't want them to be so dry that they're fragile. Just give them a little bit extra. You know, you really don't want these to be traveling when they're bone dry. Okay, because if they if bits break off, then I can't fix them. But you do need it not to lose its shape as it's traveling, okay? So if you just get your hairdryer and note when I put my hairdryer down to see if that's a good time for checking. You can see a lot of movement still in my tail. If I put a lot of wet color on that, that might just go and slip and slide off, okay? So I'm gonna start my blasting with a hairdryer and this is a good time for you guys to be hair drying too. So I know you guys have more than one to hair dry, but hopefully you've seen how long I've hair dried mine. The tail is no longer quite floppy and the edges of the wings have started to get very, very brittle. Okay, so these, because they're so fine, get very, very brittle. Okay, so you need to be very careful hair drying those, and also the beak, because it points out and it's very tiny, it will dry up very quickly. We don't want these to dry so much that they completely change color, because then when we put water from our colors on, what happens is they can just start going super soft super quickly, and then the whole beak will lose its shape. Okay, so when you've hair dried it, it shouldn't be bone dry, it shouldn't have changed color, it just should have firmed up a little bit, just like, you know, using the length of time that I have used for the hair dryer. So if you need to pause me and dry yours a little bit and then start me up again when you feel like yours is at this stage, okay, that it's just firmed up a little bit, okay, that it hasn't changed color at all, maybe the edges slightly, but no super white beaks, okay, that still should be that clay color. Okay, once you have them completely dry, okay, we're going to put our name on the bottom. So we haven't hair dried the bottom because we need that bottom to be a little bit moist for us to write the name, your name on it. Okay, so we all want to get our birds back. So when you're ready and yours has been dried, you can lift it up, turn it over, and you'll see a varying shape on the bottom. Okay, so you can see with each of mine, it just depends on the bits that we added on the kind of shape that you get. It still should have some opening. If it doesn't have an opening, you need to make one. You need to wiggle it and make an opening. Okay, this is where the air will be released for the body, but also the head. Okay, but it's a really good surface for writing your name. Your name needs to be nice and clear. It can be your first name or your initials. Your birds will be in your crate with your family surname on it. So I can match your name up with your surname. So it doesn't always have to have your surname if you don't want it. Or as I say, if it's got your initials, I can match that to your surname as well. Or if you want your name to be really big, you're going to try and make it nice and big, and it can wrap around the whole shape of the base of the bird. So you hold the stick as if it's a pen or a pencil at the bottom, and you just dig in a little bit. Please note I'm holding onto my bird. I don't want any little bits of bird to crack off. Okay, so I'm making it really big and really clear. I don't want anybody to get my bird by accident. So it's a nice big clear name. Okay, not a tiny one that would get rubbed away when we're painting it. So nice and clear and big. Okay. If you want, when you're finished painting it, if you want to check and make sure that you can still see your name before it goes into the mini crate, that would be perfect. Okay, because we definitely want these all to go back to the right makers. Okay, so it's time to paint. Now, we talked a little bit about the colors. So you can get all of your colors out. You might not want to use all of these colors. You might only want to use a few. Okay, you might only want to use 2 or 3. It's entirely up to you. Okay, you might have a plan that doesn't need blue, and that's fine, or doesn't need yellow, that's absolutely fine. Now your brushes are fine, medium, and a sort of like slightly thicker one that we've used for our water for our slip. And you have some sponges as well. Sponges will even out a color. Okay, so you have all of those at hand. I'll just grab this one that I dropped earlier. This is my slightly thicker one, which is good for dabbing on. Colors. Okay, so now we're going to color, and it's entirely up to you. Okay, I'm going to start off, I think, with white, just as a bit of a base. The clay itself is a creamy color, so if you don't want white on anywhere, you don't have to. Okay, but I'm going to do white on the breast of the bird. I'm going to dab into the porcelain white, okay, and scrape off some of the slip. I don't want loads and loads. Okay, so I'm going to show you how to sponge on. I'm going to lift my little bird up so I can get right under there. Okay, so I'm not actually writing on the name. Okay, I'm just down here, and I'm going to sponge it on. Let's lift that up a bit so you can see. Okay, maybe do it right up to his chin. Okay, I'm just sponging on. Now, if you want a really, really thick white, you would give that another blast with a hairdryer. When it's dry, then sponge on a second layer. Okay, I'm just going to dab this out onto the wings as well. Now, you can be working from a bird that maybe you see in your garden, or your favorite bird, or you can create your own plumage on the bird. It's entirely up to you. I might even go for a little bit of white on the tail. Now, he's going to be a bit slippy when you're using the slip, okay? Obviously, he's really slippy. So getting at it when it's wet, like getting it under the base, is going to be a bit tricky, okay? So like I say, if you want to get at little bits and it's a bit tricky, let it dry, okay? Give it a blast with a hairdryer and work in stages, okay? So I've got my white on. I will need to blast that dry if I'm going to put some white on the the underside of the tail, or just in small areas, okay? I'm going to use the brush now so that you can see how to apply the brush, how to apply with the brush, but also you can still even out with the sponge even if you apply with a brush. So I'm going to go with brown, and I'm going to dab brown all the way around his head that I haven't colored. White, okay? So we've got white underneath, coming up a little bit on the sides. And I'm going to dab it with the brown, and that brown's going to go all the way down his back. Okay, so you can see I'm just dabbing it on. Now, sometimes when I'm painting it on, I want to brush backwards and forwards. But if I do that, I know I'm going to start lifting the color of the clay. I need to be very careful because it is just sticky, wet clay. Even though we've dried it out a little bit, if we do brush backwards and forwards, we start blending the color that we're painting on with the color of the clay. And then it dissolves the color, or sort of makes it a little bit paler because you're mixing with like a creamy clay. So it kind of dilutes it in a sense, softens it and makes it a little bit subtler. So you do need to be careful that you dab on the paint, but sometimes it gives it a dabby look that you're not happy with. And this is where the sponge can come in handy because it can just soften over it. So it's kind of like you're evening it out. And the tail is a real delicate area. So do be careful that you support the tail. If you can see, I'm supporting the tail when I'm sponging. I think I'm just going to continue sponging a little bit of brown around the wing. And then I might blast this and add a little bit of yellow. So this is me just painting on and then sponging. Okay. So this sponging technique can softly put one color over the other. So I've got it on the other wing, so I'll try it a little bit on this. So there's barely any paint left on the sponge, but if I sponge it slightly over the white, it just leaves a very, very soft, muted fading. I might try that a little bit here, so you can see. It's subtle. You might think, no, I want something a little bit stronger, but everybody's bird's going to be different. So we do what makes us happy. Okay, so I am going to give that a little blast with the hairdryer in a minute, but I want to do the fine painting of the eye and the beak. So I'm going to use my super fine paintbrush, and I'm going to get a nice blob of black for the eye, and then I'm just going to paint it in. Now, I do find that I like to paint in around it as well. You know, the pen top leaves a circle, but it also leaves a circle surround, and I like to paint all of that so that the eye looks nice, big, like a glassy, beady eye. But if you put too much paint on, it's going to look like his mascara has run, okay? We don't want any dribbly bits. Remember, if it dribbles, just hair dry it. You take a little pointy part of the stick and just scrape that slip off, okay? Or put another bit of slip sponge to paint it over. I'm going to go for the medium-sized brush now, and I'm going to give him a little black beak. And this bit, you'll see I have to paint, but I'm doing it very, very delicately. Okay, that's kind of like a brush stroke, but I'm sort of dabbing and just moving a little bit of color up from the base of the beak to the top. I'm not like brush stroking backwards and forwards, which really does lift the color of the clay that we talked about earlier. Okay, I think a blast with the hairdryer and a second coat on the black will make it really, really rich. As I say, I do need to hairdry this to put a little bit of yellow underneath, which I quite like the idea of. But I also want to put some fine little flecks of color along his back, a little in keeping with this little guy here. Okay, so and I've got a bit of a yellow tummy on him. Okay, but I did go for a little bit of blue on the wing. I just thought, well, let's see how that looks. Okay, so remember, any bit that you don't paint is going to become a creamy whitey color. So it acts like a color in itself. Okay, so I'm just going to give this another blast with a hairdryer. If you don't need to, you just keep painting. But as I say, if there's areas that you need to get to and you're going to mess up your paint that's all wet by touching the bird, then it's better to hairdry it. Then when it's dry, you can touch it and hold it upside down and paint the underside, which is what I'm going to do next. So just at the end of the hair drying, I was just touching it lightly with finger to see if any of the slip was coming off of my hand, and that's the best way to see if it's okay to touch the piece. So you've got 4 sides of your sponge. Remember, if you're only using a light amount, you'll find that when you use one, you can easily grip it in the middle and use the other side. So I'm going to go ahead and dip it into the yellow. And I'm going to work a little bit of yellow on the edges of the wings and a little bit coming up from the base. I'm avoiding the name, so I don't really want that to get covered over because the slip has a thickness, because there's, remember, it is clay. And now obviously if you want to hair dry that, you can, so that it doesn't get all smudged when you set it down. A really light bit of sponging when the sponge is nearly dry, just coming up on the chest, so it's kind of blending with the brown that was there, and then the little bit of yellow that I've added on. Okay, now I I'm just going to add a few more bits of yellow and then do those little dots. Quite a lot there. Try and soften that off a bit. Okay, so that's maybe a little bit of yellow on his head. Barely any left on my sponge, which is lovely for a little soft effect on his head. And then I think I'm going to use the fine brush and some black and white little flecks, fine brush, and I'm just sort of just doing little tiny little brush strokes, like little almost touching but not quite. And then this is going on the area that has the dots, so it kind of works well with those. So I'm going to wash out that paintbrush thoroughly because I want to use the white now. So I just wash it in the water, give a little dry on your cloth, and then I'm going to go for the white. Some of those lines are a little bit better than others, but it's natural, so it's okay. I think I'm nearly done. Remember, you'll know when you're done. You'll know when you think, oh my goodness, I've used all my favorite colors. I've made it exactly the way I want it to be. Okay. Now, again, another blast with a hairdryer is definitely a good idea before you move it into your clay crate. Okay. So I'm going to do that just because I want to show you how to package them up to get them back to me safe and sound. Okay. So I'm going to give it a quick blast with the hairdryer. And I'm happy that that's all ready. Okay, so in your clay crate, you'll find a little mini crate. Okay, so this little mini crate has got a bit of blue absorbent paper on the bottom, and that will help dry the bird up from the base. Okay, so if I'm just double checking, we all can see our names nice and clear. Our bird is not too brittle, and he's going to go just inside our little crate. Okay, so you'll probably have another one beside it, and I've got some bubble wrap. So the bubble wrap is just to cushion him. So very carefully put the bubble wrap around. Okay, be very careful of that tail. I don't want any broken tails. Okay, so that's that little bit of bubble wrap cushioning him. Again, there should be enough then for the seconds to cushion around that. Okay, and that crate then goes inside the big crate. Okay, so I'll get that just behind me here, so I'll get that in a second. All our sponges need washed out, so just scrape off the color and give them a good wash in your little tub of water. So if you just rinse them out, should take all of that slip away, and then that keeps it from being sticky and messy and leaving trails of mess everywhere. We've got lids for all of the color. If you can just make sure the lids are on, then that will keep the color from drying out for me. We just give our paintbrush a little rinse up in the water before we get rid of that water. 3 for me. And then just a little dry on the cloth is fine. Okay. So they can just dry out as they are. They don't need to be wrapped up in tissue or plastic. They're just fine. I'm just getting rid of that water. You can just pop that down the sink and just pop all your colors back. Okay, now we do have 5 colors, only 4 can fit in there, but the lid will keep all of those intact. Okay. And then I'm going to get the crate and show you how everything fits in. So I've already got my mini crate in there. Okay, and then all your colors can fit around it, down the side. Okay, either sitting on top or down the side. Okay, your board. If you wouldn't mind just giving that a little rub over, it won't really be that messy. Okay, but just if you can just reduce the dust, because it takes about 3 or 4 times to clean a board, or wiper board to actually get most of that dust off. There we go. Okay, and then that can go in there as well. Lid on top. And that can just sit on the doorstep ready for me to pick it up. Okay, so the work, the actual beautiful birds are nice and safe in the little mini crate, so nothing should knock into those. And just as long as you keep it level, then they won't roll around. Okay, and then when I put them back in when I collect them and put them in the car, they're always level. And any kind of bumps, the bubble wrap will really, really help with those. So it does take a little while for the birds to dry out because they are thicker than say a rolled out sheet of clay, because we've pinched it, and so we're not really quite sure how thick it is. So about a week to a week and a half for them to dry out and to be fired in the kiln. They fire up to 1,000 degrees, which turns them from clay to pottery, and then I need to put on the lovely shiny glazes. I'm looking down at all these lovely shiny colours, so they get back to you and they will be fired to 1,120 degrees again. So they're really, really strong pottery. They can be in your garden all throughout the summer, but they don't like frost. Okay, so I would definitely bring them in the frosty parts of our season, our winter seasons, and maybe bring them indoors, or maybe they're never even going to get out to the garden. Maybe they're so pretty you want them indoors all the time. So thank you so much for joining me. I hope you've really, really enjoyed that. I hope that you've seen that a little pinch pot can make the most amazing characters. And I hope to see you again. You take care. All the best. Bye.